Welcome to my second video about ATSDB. In this video I would like to show the OSGView features more in detail based on the database that we created the last time in the first video. I'm going to open this database again and click again on Start. Now, the configuration that was used last time is saved in a configuration file in the background, and most of the changes that you make are going to still persist. So first, let's start with the OSGView itself without any data. Let's make this bigger. So, this OSGView is based on OpenSky, the open source library, and uses OSGearth in the background for display of map data. On the left hand side, we have the representation of the map and, if loaded, the data itself in a geographical way. We can zoom in, zoom out, pan, use double click on specific locations to zoom in, and the middle mouse button to rotate. So this is a truly 3D representation of this map, in this case a globe. The space bar then returns to the default home position. On the lower left side we have the status information, which is currently idle since no data is being loaded, the loaded time slot of the data itself on all zeros in this case, and then counters of the number of target reports which are displayed. So loaded means being loaded from the database, which can then be either skipped, meaning data needed for drawing purposes are not present, so they are skipped, or drawn, which means they are displayed in some way. On the right hand side we have the configuration panel. This shows, in this case, only the map and the geometry. No geometry is present. This is where the sensors and the target reports would be shown if there were any. But the map itself might be interesting. You can click on this menu button on the map, the small globe, and choose then different map files. These map files are OSGearth map files, which are stored in the background, so you could even add your own. Let's now select, for example, the ArcGIS map, which is a satellite-based representation of the images, which also uses an elevation layer. So you can either have a look at the mountains, which are loaded in more detail and cached on your hard drive. Another one, very useful one, would be the OpenStreetMap view, which is an OpenStreetMap layer. Let's have a look at Vienna, for example, which has incredible detail. So for our purposes, for example, where of very interest would be the Vienna airport, which even has the runway and taxiway designations. Awesome. Please note that these map layers are of course loaded from the internet, so you need an active data connection to the servers which are used in the background. The only map file where this isn't the case is the minimal map, which is the default one, which is based on an Esri shapefile, which is also delivered in the app image, to have a minimal map when you don't have access to the internet, for example. Okay, so much for that. Then let's start. Last time we simply loaded the data and had a very brief look at how this would be shown in the OSGView. So in this video I want to dive in more detail here. Let's load again and notice the speed at which this is loaded. This is 1 hour of global data from an OpenSky file in 1.5 million target reports, which of course shows that not all of the Earth is of course surveyed in using this platform, but still the speed is quite nice, I think. Okay, now we have geometry shown here, which is ATSB data, of course. Now, each one of these tracks, of these trails, is a flight that took place in this time slot that we are showing. So let's go over the options that we have. We can, of course, as I've shown you before, use different background maps. Let's go for OpenStreetMap now. And the first thing that you're going to notice is that data from behind the globe, so which would be invisible, is also shown. There's a point to that in some cases. In other cases, you don't want to see this data. For this, you can toggle the Use Depth Check button, which then hides all of the data which would be occluded by the globe, for example, or the background map in general. Let's disable that for now. Now, what is also interesting is the geometry display can be configured. So I can also click on the small button here and configure the way each target report, which is shown as point in this case, how this is displayed. So I can choose a color, for example, a lighter blue one, or a green one, whatever is best depending on the background map that you're using, for example. You can choose between a number of textures, so symbols. You can select the symbol size, the line width if they are connected, and the opacity itself. And you can, depending on how the data is structured, display or not display some parts of the data. I'm going to show this later. Okay. This is not all. So let's maybe start first with the time filter. If the time filter is activated, on the bottom you have an additional panel which basically allows you to display a time slice, a smaller time slice of the data that you've loaded. This is also shown here in the status. Now here you have a scroll bar, and by scrolling through that you can see that the targets are moving as they were in the original data. You can configure the window length that is shown, in this case 60 seconds. And you can have the autoplay mode, which basically steps this number of seconds, each second or every 2 seconds or whatever you enter here. So if you click on play, you can see that the targets are slowly moving. Still in this representation you can configure the color. With the OpenStreetMap one, I like to use darker colors. Okay, now let's disable that one again. We again get the full data representation. Now let's have a look at the display options on the lower right. You can select the group variable. A group variable defines how target reports are grouped together. So the first group that is always shown is the sensor, and within this sensor the target reports can be grouped. In this case, the attribute track number is used, which for this ATSB data is not set. We can change this to the mode S target address. We have to click redraw here. And now we see that we have a lot of different groups. These different groups are basically each one a target address, a unique target address, which is then shown together and connected by lines. Another nice feature is the use of the height information, the altitude information. In this case, this is barometric altitude, but let's not go into details here. It can be used in the three-dimensional display if wanted. So this would be, let's say, a two-dimensional representation. So the height is not used. So let's use it. We hit redraw. And now we have a 3D representation. Let's also use the depth check here. And using the middle mouse button, we can see the altitude information is shown. Let's use a lighter color. Again, in this representation, the time filter can be used. That's it for now. In the next video, we will have a look at the filter functionality.